Hi, so we're back. Let's start talking about the Tide article, the King of the Gentiles and the leader who serves, Luke 22:24 through 30. So, obviously, in this text, if you've looked at it, Jesus is talking about leadership and what that looks like. So, I've asked you to critique this article. Let's walk through some things that I found in the article that may help as you think about how you want to do the article. Um, the very first thing, obviously, is the thesis. On the second page, which is page 24 in the numeration, there is a paragraph. There are the second paragraph before number one, the King of the Gentiles lorded over them. All right, so go up two, and there's a paragraph that starts Gandhi and Martin Luther King. In that paragraph, the one, two, three, fourth line down, he writes, "The leader who serves also presents a transforming vision of legitimate authority, where strength perfected in weakness, a Paul term, strength perfected in weakness is proved by God to be genuine power." Now, there's also the last sentence right above number one. This is the second sentence in the paragraph that begins this vision of authority. So he writes, "God's way of ruling sets a new standard and yields evangelical wisdom." Evangelical here does not mean evangelical like the evangelical movement in the United States. It means that which is related to the gospel. So the Greek word euangelion means gospel. And when we talk about something that is related to the gospel, when that is transliterated out for English, it comes out evangel. So in that sense, evangelical means something related to the gospel. So starting again, God's way of ruling sets a new standard and yields evangelical wisdom concerning the legitimate exercise of power. So my question is, which one is the thesis? Assuming, for the moment, that one of the two is. But wait, there is a third potential candidate here. It is at the end of the Gandhi Martin Luther King paragraph that I mentioned earlier. Luke's portrait of Jesus' dominion, Jesus plural, Jesus' dominion, is a definitive presentation of the model. Now, I would say that last one, a definitive presentation of the model, that sentence is probably not the thesis, though I could understand why someone would articulate that it was. I would contend that it's probably not, because it is dependent on understanding what the model is, and that for that you have to go to the sentence right before it. The leader who serves also presents a transforming vision, so forth and so on. So for me, if I were doing this assignment, I would probably argue for one of these two statements. The leader who serves also presents a transforming vision of legitimate authority, so forth, or God's way of ruling sets a new standard and yields evangelical wisdom concerning the legitimate exercise of power. Those two statements are firm. They're not built on what has come before, in the sense that they're not of the same ilk. So we start with Patrick Dolan, then we go to Max Dupree. The writer's telling a story. He's getting us ready there to for the information of what his agenda is. His agenda is the thesis. I guess some might argue for the last statement in the paragraph right before Gandhi and Martin Luther King. This authority is clearly revealed in the Messiah who reigned in self-sacrifice. But I don't see that one quite as clearly as the thesis. I think one of these other two sets out something in a declarative way that sets an agenda. Now, where that's going to cash out is as we go through the article to see if one of those two things, or both of them, because they're kind of similar, if one or both of those two things is proved out. Now, is there a right and a wrong? No, there's not. The fact is, both of these statements that I'm suggesting, and you may come up with a different one, but they have to be able to make your case, right? Both of these set out an agenda. Are they related to each other in setting out the agenda of what the writer is trying to do through the rest of the article? That's why I would argue for one of these two. Now, obviously, for doing the assignment this week, you may think, I have to agree with the professor. You don't actually. But this is, I'm trying to explain my thought processes, why I come to one of these two things. It's in the introduction. It sets out an agenda for the future. It's declarative. It is definite. You can look at it. You can trace the ideas to these statements. One of these statements right here. Others, while close, and that's the thing about a thesis. Yeah, unless the writer says my thesis is this, which very often they don't. We're left to kind of discern that a little bit. So that's how I do it. That's how I look at this particular one. You may argue for something else, and that's fine. But whatever you argue for, I think has to meet the criteria that I've established both in previous videos and then in this one as well. So we'll come back and we'll talk about the intended audience next. A little out of order from what we've done before, but we'll talk about the intended audience.